Well, that's a bit of a dramatic introduction. My name is Jerry Kroth. I'm a professor in California. I've written books on crop circles and other subjects. This is one crop circle that I found really, really intriguing and very foreboding. Now, I thought originally I would just write an article about this, but it ended up much more complicated than I thought. So, this is a tiny book about a solar cataclysm that is coming between 2023 and 2026. It is like a prediction. And it's not something that you can do in an instant. I thought it would be a simple process of a few steps, and it turns out it's not the case. So before we get started, let's learn a little bit more about the crop circle. All right, so in explaining this to a few of my colleagues, I said, "My God, this is a huge discovery." And they said, "Jerry, I'm not getting it. I don't follow how you get from this step to that step." And then I realized that this is a really intricate journey. Now, if you skip to the end of this video, it will make no sense to you. Okay, but if you have the patience to stick this out, you will be astonished. This is an extremely important statement, and I mean, if you watch this to the end, you are likely to say, 10% probability, you're likely to say, I'm changing my attitude about the world. That is how important this is. Okay? So we're going to do this in baby steps. And because I needed to do it in baby steps when I started this. I quit this project twice because it was just too complicated for me. So I started with something I thought I could understand and ignored the rest. And that looked like a sun, and that looked like the Earth rotating around the sun. Step one. I said, well, maybe that's Jupiter, and maybe that's the red spot of Jupiter. But Jupiter has 80 moons, so I discarded that. And I said, just stick with the sun. That's the sun, Earth rotating, summer, fall, winter, spring, something like that. Okay. Step two, we're going to do this really slow. I needed to do this slowly when I did the research on this. This is May of 2022, 6 months ago. Okay? That looks like a sunspot to me, doesn't it to you? Well, it turns out that the sun is at a low sunspot cycle. No sunspots, and we're just entering a new solar cycle where sunspots are appearing. Okay? So that is a sunspot that occurs in June. This is a crop circle that appears in May. And I said to myself, wait a second. How does a person know in May there's going to be a sunspot in June that's almost in the same place? This is getting weird. But I'm just intrigued at this point. Then a third step, is that a sunspot or is that a solar eruption? If you look closely at the crop circle, they could have made a hole there, but whoever made it look like there was an eruption. Well, it turns out we're going to step 4 already, and I'm learning about sunspots. I'm a psychologist. I have a PhD in psychology, so this is all strange to me. Sunspots are the source of solar flares, or CMEs, coronal mass ejections. Okay? According to NASA, a solar flare is an intense burst of radiation that comes from the release of magnetic energy linked with sunspots. Okay? So, sunspots are the origin or the place where these solar explosions occur. I didn't know that. Shall we go to step 5? Stay with me. Are solar flares dangerous to Earth? And this is about the Carrington Event. Okay, a solar flare can spew out from the sun at a rate of 7 million miles an hour. Okay? and it travels to the Earth, takes about 24 hours to hit Earth when it does. The most dangerous of all solar storms was called the Carrington Event of 1859, okay? And it really gave us a hit like nothing else, right? And if it happened today, it would be very dangerous. But then all they had were telegraphs, which got messed up. So, does this crop circle give us any clues? Well, it seems to show that the closest point is like the Earth is primed for a hit at that point. Maybe that's a direct hit. I don't know. So let's go to step 7. Is the crop circle eruption the same size as Carrington? Now that's Carrington there. He was an amateur astronomer, and he studied the sun, and he made drawings. They didn't have photographs then, but very meticulous drawings. They gave him an award. Now, the Carrington event occurs. No one knows on Earth what's going on. Many people thought the Earth was on fire because the sky was changed. You could read at midnight, and it looked like the whole Earth was on fire. And Carrington was later said, I think it came from the sun. And he drew that sunspot, okay? Now, I took the crop circle and I blew up the photograph and tried to make it the equivalent of the Carrington drawing. And I measured it with my little ruler. And I noticed that the Carrington sunspot on the top was 2.2 centimeters. And the crop circle sunspot was 2.2 centimeters. And I thought, isn't that weird? Whoever made the crop circle made the sunspot the same as the 1859 sunspot that Carrington drew. Well, I wanted to ask the next question, step 8. How does the crop circle sunspot correspond to other sunspots? Okay, so according to NASA, there was a gigantic sunspot in 2014. They called it massive. They said it was gigantic. They said 10 Earths could fit through this sunspot, and it was measured at 80,000 miles across. Okay, that was one of the biggest sunspots of the last century. But the Carrington sunspot was 123,000 miles across, not 80,000. So it was bigger than the biggest one that we've seen. Now watch this. I'm going to go slowly because in a few minutes you're going to start saying, holy cow, or something even worse or more profane. In other words, the sunspot in the crop circle is closer to Carrington than to the 2014 gigantic sunspot. It is more massive. This should be simple. Let's stay simple, because when we get to the end, you're saying this is not simple. But I'm going to try to stay simple. Now watch this. During the process of doing this research, I said in the morning, boy, I wish I could superimpose the Carrington sunspot on this crop circle sunspot. I wonder if I could do that. And I didn't know how. I used Keynote, a Macintosh program, and I thought, I wonder if I could learn. So I set off to do this. And this is the biggest discovery of this video. I'm going to even have a drum roll. So I made a video of myself doing this. So watch this very carefully. And here's a drum roll. Okay, I learned how to do something, so I have to make a movie of this. First, I'm going to take the Carrington drawing. You see it down here? I'm going to take this drawing and drag it over to the crop circle, okay? And I'm going to place it right so that it fits right like on top of this sun of the crop circle. Let me make it just exactly right. Now watch, I'm going to make it translucent. I know how to do that. I'm making this translucent. Watch what happens. You can see that the sunspot of the crop circle is almost a perfect fit over the Carrington. Watch this. Here's the Carrington drawing right here. I'm going to make it opaque or translucent, and I'm taking it, and you can see right now that the crop circle sunspot is a perfect fit for the Carrington drawing of 1859. Holy shit. So I said to myself then, you got to control your enthusiasm, and you don't swear in your videos, Jerry. You got to do this step by step, man. This is a discovery. Who in God's name would make a crop circle like this? Who knows about this stuff? So I'm trying to discipline myself to really stay clear and intelligible. Step 9, more about the Carrington event. This is from a charming lady who's called the Physics Girl. That's what she calls herself. And she did a short video, and I asked her for permission to use this clip to explain Carrington a little more.
In 1859, there was a geomagnetic storm so big that the aurora was visible in Hawaii.
Holy wow.
They had telegraph systems. Some of the operators were reported to be able to send messages even when they weren't plugged into their batteries. They were just using the current generated from this geomagnetic storm. This thing was the largest geomagnetic storm in recorded history. It was called the Carrington Event. A solar superstorm like this is not unusual. It could happen again today, and it would be way worse, like way worse. It would cost more than the top 10 natural disasters in the US combined to recover from. So yeah, these solar superstorms are getting more and more likely leading up to 2025. The sun has these periods of activity where there's a period of when there are the most sunspots, and then periods of a little bit of calm about once every 11 years. Why every 11 years? It turns out that it's because on average every 11 years, the sun's north and south pole switch. So the Carrington event happened coming into the maximum of the 10th cycle of the sun, the 10th since 1755, when we started recording that the sun came in cycles. No one noticed that until they were able to see sun.
Okay, so that gives you a little background on Carrington. Now, what happens if the Carrington event hits today? Step 10. Well, this is from the literature, and all the references of this talk are in that book, okay, and which is much more extensive than this talk. There would be $2.6 trillion in damages in North America alone. Blackouts would occur across the globe. This is the worst case scenario now. The internet would be seriously disabled. Hospitals and pacemakers would be impacted. Nuclear power stations could overload. There would be worldwide disruption in GPS signals, in satellites. There would be the equivalent of 20 Hurricane Katrinas, says one author. And it would take at least 4 years to recover. All right, anything still plugged in could overload. Refrigerators, your computers, devices of all sorts. Now, I consulted with two solar physicists in making this video. One university professor and one really nice guy from NASA, a PhD solar physicist, because I asked questions frequently about, am I on the right track? Is this true? So the solar physicist said at NASA said, it's a worst case scenario that you need to unplug your refrigerator, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. So we'll get to that later. All right, here's another video.
On the other hand, there is the worst case scenario wherein we fail to prepare, or where we don't have sufficient warning of an incoming Carrington level event. This would result in some of the most extensive blackouts ever seen, a simultaneous loss of power, loss of communications, and the failure of most modern technology. Planes would be grounded, hospitals left in the dark, traffic control in cities absent. Card-based transactions would be impossible. Refrigeration would fail. Banking services would be offline. Supply chains would crumble. The world at large could be thrown back hundreds of years in terms of technology. And this wouldn't necessarily be just for the duration of the event. If power grids were not taken offline to protect them before the event, permanent damage could be caused. Given the scale of some power grids, experts estimate that it could take as long as 10 years to completely recover from a worst-case scenario Carrington-level event. Finally, It should also be stressed that it really isn't a question of if, but when. Estimates vary, but it is thought by many that a Carrington-level event might strike the Earth, on average, once every 150 years. At the time of recording, it has been more than 160 years since the Carrington event. We are, by some measures, overdue.
Okay, that's kind of dramatic, but it's not totally true. NASA has a storm tool that gives us a 24-hour warning. It tells us that there was been a storm, and we got 24 hours before it hits, and it's traveling at 7 million miles an hour, and it's coming our way. But we can turn off our transformers, and if we do, we will protect ourselves. So he said to me there was a transformer that wasn't turned off in Canada, and it shut down in the early 1990s, I think, and it shut down most of Quebec and northeastern United States. And those transformers are the size of rooms, and they're not easy to rebuild and to repair. But it's not, this worst case scenario is not entirely true. Okay, so all the references are in the book, and we're continuing now to look at this crop circle. Is the 24-hour warning, is that enough? Can we unplug our grid, our transformers, cities, counties, GPS systems, satellites in time to avoid this? Can we unplug our refrigerators and cell phones and internet and our solar inverters? Now, the other question is, can Pakistan, India, Libya, and China do the same? We've got a 24-hour warning. What if they don't heed it? Do you remember Trump heard about COVID and he thought it was a hoax? He didn't do anything for 2 months. What happens if there is a 24-hour warning and China says, those are Americans, they're just, or what if some country fails to react? Well, they go into the dark ages. So what are the chances of a direct hit? Well, if you look at the literature, it's all over the place. There was a tree ring study of solar radiation that said there's a chance for an event 10 times stronger than Carrington hitting the Earth every 3,000 years. They say it's every 500 years. Two authors say it's every 150 years. The consensus seems to be, as you saw in that video, 150 years. So those are your references there. So we're overdue. Okay, because it's 163 years since Carrington. So what's it mean? Now, my wife said, Jerry, what's it mean? A colleague say, all right, can you explain this carefully? So here's what it means so far. It means there is a crop circle warning of a solar cataclysm coming our way, which is, quote, as big as the Carrington event of 1859. Okay, remember the drum roll. It is bigger than anything we have seen in our lifetimes. It is the equivalent of 20 Hurricane Katrinas all at once just for the United States. That's its impact on us. And if we are not prepared, it could throw us into the dark ages for more than a few years. And if the rest of the world is not prepared, it could throw them into the dark ages for years as well. That's what it means so far. Now, part 2, we're starting with new steps. When is this going to happen? Okay, this is part 2. There's the crop circle. Okay, we have not talked about the entire crop circle. This is the part we haven't even talked about. This is the part that was puzzling to me. I said to myself, I quit. Why would there be a gear shift or a gear or a rotary surrounding the sun and the earth? Makes no sense to me. And I sent this off to a friend of mine and said, I quit. You take over. And I actually gave up on this twice. Couldn't figure it out. Couldn't say. I felt like I was just guessing. And this guy is now we're going to talk about this part. His name is Horace Drew. He's a PhD from Caltech, professor in Australia. he and I talk. We have never agreed on anything, but he likes to work on crop circles. So do I. He says, Jerry, you and I are the only two professors in the world working on this. And I said, you're wrong. There are many more than that. So we don't agree on anything. But I said to him, I quit. I don't know what this is. This is before the drum roll event. And he said, Jerry, I think that's a timeline. A timeline. So I thought, I got interested. I said, a timeline. I decided to make some measurements, okay? So I said, I'm going to call these things gear teeth. And I noticed they're different sizes. Look, if you measure that, this is a photograph. If you measure that, that's 2.5 centimeters. And if you measure that, it's 2 centimeters. 2.5, 2.5, all the way around, exactly. And if you go and measure this outside stick thing that sticks out, that's 1 centimeter. And this one is 4/10 of a centimeter. 4/10, all the way around, all the same. In other words, the gear teeth are irregular, but they are regular in their irregularity. I told you this was going to get complicated. Don't go away. Okay, so one person said to me, this is sloppy. It's obviously made by human beings. And I said, I blew up the photograph some more, larger. And again, the larger section is now 5.4 centimeters. The smaller one is 3 centimeters, okay? It may look sloppy, but it is precisely irregular. Smaller, larger, smaller, larger, smaller, larger, all the way around. Step 2. Now, the steps have changed now, 1, 2, 3, 4, because now we're asking the question, when is this going to happen? So step 2, the gear teeth are different sizes, but they are the same length. Watch carefully. This is line A, and that's line B. See the little arrow going to line A, and look at line B. Those are like the hypotenuse or whatever you want to call it. Now, line A and line B are equal in length. I'm going to draw a little white line. See that line? That line is equal in length to that line. Okay, so what's it mean? Now, hold on. I used to teach dream work. I'm a psychologist. I taught students how to decode dreams. Dreams are often metaphors. This is some kind of a metaphor. Okay, what is different in width but the same length? Okay, can't figure it out. What is different in size but the same length? Can't figure it out. Puzzled, frustrated. And then I had an insight. I've got it. Solar maximums and solar minimums. Okay? They're the same length, 11 years, but some have almost no sunspots and some have lots of sunspots. 2 different things, 2 different sizes, the same length. Oh, getting warmer. Solar maximums and solar minimums are generally the same length, 11 years. So let's do a little homework, because I don't even know what these things are at this moment in time. I consult my physicists, I look at some videos, here's some interesting explanatory video.
So first, what is a solar cycle? Our sun is a huge ball of electrically charged hot gas, and these generate powerful magnetic field around the sun. This magnetic field keeps moving on the surface of the sun, and the poles shift upside down. North pole goes to the south and the south to the north. This process takes 11 years to complete, and this is called the solar cycle. This cycle keeps repeating for every 11 years, flipping the north and the south poles. The first solar cycle was recorded in 1755, and right now we are in the middle of a solar cycle 24 and solar cycle 25. Between every solar cycle, during the transition period, sun's magnetic field becomes weak, and we can see some dark spots on the surface of the sun, where there are less magnetic field, so the surface of the sun is quite visible. These dark spots are called as sunspots. Sunspots are due to reduced magnetic fields and are called as solar minimum. So that is what a solar lockdown is actually. When they have extreme magnetic fields, there are eruptions on the surface of the sun, and this takes place in the middle of the solar cycle and that is called as a solar maximum. So the transition between a solar cycle 24 and the solar cycle 25 should be happening around April 2020, with approximately a plus or minus 6 months.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Now, this is a graph from a physics journal about solar cycles right now. And you can see we had a lot of solar sunspots, 2010, 2015, then they come down to zero. Okay, and now the red line is what they project is going to happen to us in our future. So here's a solar minimum, 11 years from 2008 to 2019. And here's a solar maximum from 2014 to 2025, making a 22-year cycle. So I send this slide that you're seeing to my solar physicist university professor, and I said, I'm a psychologist, is this correct? I don't want to be saying things that are not correct about this subject. He said, right on the button, Jerry, you've got it. So that slide you're looking at has been vetted. All right? Now we seem to know what a solar minimum and a solar maximum is. Let's go back to the solar cycles. You see, all of these cycles have been recorded, minimum, maximum, all the way up to the present moment. Good. So let's not get lost. We're going to do this step by step. Ever since that drum roll, we are going to go slow and get this down. The crop circle is showing us gear teeth that are smaller and gear teeth that are larger, but both of the same length. And we're interpreting that. There's the smaller and there's the larger, okay, from the crop circle. And we are thinking that represents solar minimums, which are smaller, and solar maximum, which are larger, but which are all the same length, which is 11 years. Okay, all right, so number 4. Where does this Carrington event fit in all of this? Watch very carefully. This is the Carrington event of 1859, August, early part of the solar cycle. You see it? Okay. Now this is a step that I find tricky, hard to explain, so I do hope you will stick with me on this. Step 5. The gear teeth, which we're saying are solar cycles in the crop circle, are surrounded by an octagon. Look, you see the octagon, 8 sides, which includes 2 gear teeth each, 1 solar minimum and 1 solar maximum. One more time. Each side of the octagon, there's the side, contains 1 solar maximum right there and 1 solar minimum right there. Okay? Could you say that again? I have a few of these GIFs in here just to keep a little level of humor going. I can say it again. Watch, I'm going to say it again for you and for him. Each side of the octagon, there it is, it has 2 gear teeth, or 2 11-year cycles, representing 22 years. All right, don't get discouraged, folks. We are decoding the timeline. One more time. The crop circle is identifying a 176-year timeline. Each of the 16 gear teeth represents 11 years. Watch carefully. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 16. 16 gear teeth, each one representing 11 years. The octagon, each side of the octagon contains 2 11-year cycles, 1 maximum, 1 minimum, a 22-year cycle. Okay, there it is, and there it is. Now that means if each gear tooth is 11 years, the timeline in the crop circle is 11 times 16, or 176 years. Right? And if each octagon side represents 2 gear teeth, 22 years, 22 times 8 is 176 years. This is a 176-year calendar, a timeline. I hope you followed that. I'm doing my best. Okay, let's go now. You could ask, why are you showing us a 176-year timeline? Is the crop circle saying another Carrington event is going to happen in 176 years? Well, thanks a lot. I will make sure I tell my great-grandchildren to be on the alert. Thanks for the heads up. Okay. Or does this 176-year timeline begin with the Carrington event of 1859? Oh boy. Okay. Step 7. The total number of solar cycles is a timeline that takes us back to the Carrington event of 1859. 1859 plus 176 years takes us to 2035. This is a message. This is an announcement. All right? I hope that this... Now watch this. I can explain this a second time this way. Here's Carrington. Boom. Here's Carrington plus 176 years. Okay? The very next solar cycle. The one we are starting right now. Okay? It should be starting to get dramatic for you. Okay. Step 8. Does that mean that another Carrington event will occur in 176 years from 1859 or in 2035? Well, we have time to prepare. What a relief. Not so fast, Buster. I would like to believe that too. But that's not where this takes us. Watch carefully. If you draw a line from the sunspot, which I colored red, to the Earth, it points to the maximum of a solar cycle. Not the end, but the maximum of the solar cycle. It points to the maximum part of the gear tooth. Okay? Watch this carefully. This is Carrington. This is Carrington plus 16. Count 16 gear teeth or 16 solar cycles, and you come out at the solar cycle we are beginning now. Number 16. We're beginning that right now. It points to the maximum of the 16th solar cycle. That's the maximum. And when exactly is the maximum of the 16th solar cycle after Carrington? Here it is. This is the maximum. And that's 2025 to 2026. Okay, the drum roll should still be going on in your head. That's what the crop circle is pointing to. Now, here's the most important sentence in this talk comes from a journal, a physics journal, and I italicized it. This is a peer-reviewed article, Helioscientists report. They're not talking about Carrington. They're not talking about CMEs or solar explosion. They're only talking about sunspots. They're talking about this coming solar cycle and how many sunspots they expect to see in this solar cycle. Here's the italicized sentence. The maximum will occur no earlier than the year 2023 and no later than 2026, with a minimum peak sunspot number of 95 and a maximum peak sunspot number of 130. They're predicting between 95 and 130 sunspots between 2023 and 2026. That means the maximum sunspots will occur between 2023 and 2026. And remember, sunspots are the origin of solar flares, or CMEs, coronal mass ejections. So if there's another Carrington event in this solar cycle, it will occur between 2023 and 2026. The crop circle is announcing another Carrington event will occur at the maximum of this cycle, which is 2023 to 2026. I told you if you skip to the end of this, this will make no sense. But if you stayed with me, this should make sense to you. So that means it could be as early as 2023, which is, by the way, I'm making this video 4 weeks before 2023. Okay? 23 is where the beginning of the maximum starts to those physicists. And that's why I used those dates in the title of my book, 2023 to 2026. Okay. Step 10. Do scientists agree? The answer is no. Okay. We're out on a limb. Okay. Scientists believe that a Carrington event actually occurred in 2012, but it missed Earth by 9 days. Okay? And they believe that it's not likely again for another 150 years. I'm going to show you a video on this now.
I shot off in a direction. So every 11 years, you have more of a potential for a hit of a solar superstorm. And the last time, it missed us by 9 days because the sun was just facing the wrong way. So yeah, 2012 is the near miss where a Carrington-sized event just missed Earth.
Wait, it happened in 2012?
2012.
The end of the world year? Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah, but the end of the world just missed us. And it missed us by 9 days because the sun spins about every 25 days. It just happened to be not facing us by a 9-day miss.
Okay, so reviewing the literature from science now, it's the consensus is they say that during this next solar cycle, there's less than a 2% chance of a Carrington event. Another article says 1.5% chance. It's not going to happen during this solar cycle. Not likely again for another 150 years. Those are your references. They're in the book too. Okay, so science is not on the same page that we are on. So, step number 11, the crop circle begs to differ. It shows us a Carrington event hitting Earth. It shows us 16 solar cycles since Carrington, covering 176 years. It predicts another event during the maximum of this current solar cycle. And the maximum of this solar cycle will be between 2023 and 2026. That's the end of our journey. It took us actually 22 steps to get here. And I do hope that I explained this, and I hope I made this intelligible. Now, I have two final items I want to talk to you about. One is, what does this mean to you? And number two, who made this crop circle? Okay, let's talk about what this means to you. First, the best case scenario is that we get a 24-hour warning. They shut off the electrical grid of the United States of America. You don't have any power for a day, maybe 2 days. And that saves most of the electronic infrastructure of the country in North America. Okay? And your refrigerator is off, but 2 days later, it's back on and everything is working. Okay? Cell phones are working. What if people do not heed the warning? What if countries, what if individuals? Do you remember Trump? That's February 2020. Trump said, people are already dying from COVID, and he said it's a hoax. It's a hoax of a Democratic Party. Didn't order masks, didn't order tests. Thousands of people died. South Korea was right on the ball, quarantining, masks, tests, and we took a couple months to get ready. We were very slow with masks and very slow with tests, very slow with quarantining. Well, who is to say that everybody is going to behave properly during this worst case, this 24-hour period? So the worst case scenario is that whole countries go dark. Do you remember Puerto Rico was hit by a Hurricane Maria? Maria. And it destroyed the entire electrical system of Puerto Rico. They were dark. And it took them 4 years to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. One guy, I read an article of him, he had been without electricity for an entire year. So this man is carrying water in the Ukraine. Russia has knocked out the electrical system in parts of Kiev. If you're living in a condo on the 6th floor, the elevator doesn't work. There are no lights. There's no heat. You're carrying water 6 flights up to your cold, dark apartment. That's what it means to have no power. So what does it mean to you if we have a worst case scenario? Now, I don't want to scare people, so I'm not going to go crazy with this. But if we were to say, let's make a rational and a conservative statement, what should we do? Well, I think we should say this. Could you survive for a month without electricity? I think that would be a reasonable conclusion from this talk. What would you do if you were told you're going to have no electricity for the next month? Well, if you have a home, you probably need to have a generator, okay? And if you have an electric oven, you probably need to have a propane cooker so that you can cook food, because you're not going to have a refrigerator or refrigerated food. And you probably need an AM/FM radio that's battery operated. In fact, you need lots of batteries. But you need a radio that's battery operated in case there is stuff going on, because there are no cell phones, no telephones, probably no internet. And you can also start looking at YouTube, because there are people called preppers, and they teach you how to survive for more than months, some a year without a grocery store. So you can learn from that. So some survival advice, I think, is important. Okay, that's the first conclusion from this talk. So the second element is, who made this crop circle? Okay, I'm very interested. I have 3 theories, and you may have one or two. Hypothesis 1, hooligans made the crop circle. Hypothesis 2, concerned human beings made this crop circle. Hypothesis 3, an alien intelligence made this crop circle. Let's look. I color-coded them so we will not get confused. Let's take a look at the first hypothesis. Hooligans, vandals made it. There are guys who wear masks in Britain. I mean, making a crop circle in a farmer's field is against the law. It's trespass. You cause $3,000 worth of damage. These people go there, they make a crop circle, they hide their footprints, they have their own, they call themselves circle makers, and they're anonymous. And I write to some of them, and they say, I'm not going to tell you, Jerry, who made that crop circle. We made them all, but you're not in on our club. So I've tried to penetrate these little cells. So let's think that hooligans, vandals made the crop circle. Well, they just went out there and said, hey, let's put a sun down there, put in a sunspot, and we'll put a gear shift around it. Come on, we'll make a decoration. After all, there's no logic to it. There's no irrationality. They didn't research the Carrington event. They just made a crop circle on a spirograph, put it in a farmer's field, and said, ha, ha, ha. That's what they do. Okay? Let's look at evidence against that hypothesis. I have a friend who's a Harvard graduate who believes this stuff. Okay? Well, I wrote to the farmer. This occurs in a village called Hippenscombe, population 247. They know each other. It's quiet there. And I said, did you see any footprints, any tire tracks? Did you hear anything? There were no witnesses. There were no footprints. There were no tire tracks. There were no barking dogs, no broken fences. The farmer said he heard nothing. He saw a drone flying over the crop circle the next day. Okay. The first time he heard of this crop circle, he saw it on the internet, on his property. Okay. So, and if it was merely decorative, hooligans didn't perfectly and precisely superimpose a replica of the Carrington 1859 sunspot onto the crop circle under cover of darkness in the middle of the night, with no one seeing or hearing them. That is kind of outrageous to think that. Okay? Don't forget.
The Carrington drawing of 1859.
Okay? If it's decorative, it's decorative. Why would it precisely embed the Carrington sunspot? Way too precise for hooligans and vandals. Okay. So, sorry, that does not make any sense. All right, so then let's go to our second hypothesis. Concerned human beings made this crop circle. So everything we said is true. There's a 176-year calendar, 16 gear teeth, 16 solar cycles happening during the maximum. It's a prediction. It's a statement. It was made by a piece of people who are obviously smart, who know about solar minimums and maximums and know about the Carrington event. So these are smart people who made a crop circle. And that's, I think, how a lot of people would analyze this. Yes, everything we said about decoding the crop circle is correct, but aliens didn't make it. Human beings made it. Come on. Okay, let's look at that hypothesis. Okay, let's take a look at evidence against that. It's a reasonable idea. Well, first of all, concerned humans, who's going to figure this out? You make a crop circle, you're making an announcement about a coming solar cataclysm, and you've chosen to do it using a crop circle? No one is interested in crop circles. No one's trying to decode them. They think anybody who decodes crop circles is crazy. So who are you trying to reach? How many people have figured this out? There are about 7 theories about this crop circle published in the Cropcircleconnector. And there's only one person in the world who has decoded it and said it's about a solar cataclysm. And who do you think that is? Me. There's only one person that you succeeded in communicating with. I don't know anybody else who has this interpretation. Okay, so it's not a good way to communicate, guys and ladies, to make a crop circle. Okay, so why not publish it? If you know that scientists don't believe this, and they give it only a 2% chance of happening, but you think it's going to happen, why don't you publish an article in a journal about that? Why don't you at least write a blog post? You will communicate with a lot more people than just one Jerry Kroth in your audience. So if you have to make a crop circle, golly, why not at least put it in English? Okay? Solar cataclysm coming. Be prepared. Now that would get a little more attention. But instead you make this extremely abstract pictograph. Come on. And you know what? There's another issue. You're supposed to be compassionate because you're trying to communicate to the world that there's going to be a solar cataclysm coming, a Carrington-sized event, and you're doing it in a crop circle, but you're also criminals. How can you be compassionate and criminals at the same time? You're vandalizing a farmer's field. You're causing him $1,000, $1,500, up to $3,000 in damages. Why didn't you go to the farmer and say, sir, we want to make a crop circle. We're concerned about a Carrington-sized event. We'll be happy to pay you for any damages to your crop. You didn't do that. Why didn't you do that? You're compassionate people and you're criminals? I'm sorry. As much as you want to believe this, concerned human beings did not make this crop circle. Sorry, that does not make any sense. You should have got permission from the farmer if you needed to make a crop circle and say what you said. And you didn't. So that leaves me, and probably you, with the last hypothesis. An alien intelligence made this. It's not in a language we know. It's not written in English or Spanish or Russian. It's mathematical and pictographic, and it's in their language, quite specific once you figure it out, but it's not easy. It seems compassionate. It's a warning. It's a prediction. It's there for us to figure out and say something is going to happen. It's an early warning system, but it's kind of obscure. And however controversial that thought may be, it's a testable hypothesis. What I mean by that is either it happens or it doesn't. Okay, watch. If it doesn't happen between 2023 and 2026, well, then this interpretation that you've been watching is all wrong. It means that scientists were right after all. No, more than a 2% chance. It means aliens didn't make the crop circle. And it means that you're fools and I'm a fool for believing in conspiracy theories and Kroth's a dunce. Okay? That's what it means if it doesn't happen. Everything you've seen in this video is incorrect. The question is, what if it does happen between 2023 and 2026? That means it wasn't made by anyone from this planet. That is what it means. It means we've been receiving extraterrestrial messages and ignoring them. It means we've been ignoring them because of denial, of bias, of prejudice, of fear of the unknown. It means there are over 4,000 crop circles that we have been systematically ignoring because of our prejudices. It means we should be paying attention to crop circles and trying to decode them. And more than a couple of university professors ought to be involved in this. Now, I'm done, but I want to give you a postscript. Okay, just a short little anecdote. You heard of the program Ancient Aliens? It's kind of a strange program on TV, a documentary. It's been on for years, but UFOs and things. Well, I get a call in August from the executive producer of Ancient Aliens. Hey, Dr. Kroth, we want to fly to Hollywood because we're doing an episode on crop circles. And he read my book. This is my major book, Messages from the Gods, on the extraterrestrial origin of crop circles. There are 42 crop circles in there, which I believe were extraterrestrial messages. But usually benevolent, actually. And he read it, and he said, we're going to fly to Hollywood. How would you like to do that? So I flew in the morning. I got dressed up, a suit and tie. They looked at my hair, no makeup, but hair stuff. And they interviewed me. This guy was well read. He was really up on his subject. One of the best interviewers I have ever met. And he interviewed me probably for an hour and 15 minutes. I'll probably be on TV for 15 seconds, but they paid me $550, flew me back, and they taped me for an hour and a half, hour and 15 minutes, something like that. So, but this crop circle was not on that agenda because I had not done the research yet. That was August of this year, and I've done this research since then. So none of that is in that interview, but it's going to be on TV soon, this episode, Ancient Aliens, Crop Circles. Keep your eye open for it. So this book does not contain this analysis, okay? This little short book is all about what we talked about today, and you can get it on Amazon, and it covers all of the references that we've mentioned here and more, and you can contact me through my website. One last thing. First, I want to thank you for sticking this out, because this is complicated. And if you stuck it out, I congratulate you, because I think we're now on the same page. And I want you to know, I believe what I'm saying. I'm not just making this up. I believe this is going to happen. Okay? And I hope we're ready for it. Last thing, I don't advertise my videos. I cannot stand commercials. YouTube keeps monetizing. I keep shutting it off. They keep turning it on. I hope you didn't see any commercials. But people say, please click like and please subscribe. Well, I think that's true. You need to like it and you need to subscribe, because if you don't monetize your videos and you don't click like and subscribe, it's that YouTube kind of programs your video into non-existence. So I don't like advertising. So share this with your friends. Click like, click subscribe. And thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it.